You are the king. Yeah, yeah, I love that. King of the class, man. Take your crown, king. Crown, king. Crown, king. Hey, welcome back. Thank y'all for joining us. This is the Black Cow Podcast. I am C Dub, and here my man
CVC's in the building with y'all.
What's up, brother?
What's up?
What's up? Hey, so we want to welcome y'all. Thank y'all for joining us. Thank y'all for having us. We welcome you here to this podcast. You guys could have been anywhere else in the world, but you're here with us. So again, thank y'all for being here. We are excited to finally be able to talk about talk about some substance. Kind of get on the table like, hey man, like let's talk about this real quick. So we're gonna dive right into this Breonna Taylor case, right? Now this case is like breathtaking. This is something that has been on a lot of people's mind, everybody's mind, hopefully. And I just don't feel like we're getting answers.
We are not getting the answers that we need.
And I have tons of questions, right? And this, as a LEO person and a black man in our community, we have like questions that it's like, you know, and we want to share these questions because we want people to have these as like, you know, reasonable questions, because sometimes when our criminal justice system is set up in a way where it's not exactly transparent. A lot of what we do is case law. It's not even state law. You know what I mean? So that's hard to follow in and of itself sometimes if you're just a layman citizen, well, not layman, but a layperson for appropriateness. And so I really am excited to get to this. So I don't want to go through the whole. I mean, I don't think we should go through the whole
thing. No,
because
everybody knows.
I think we know the timeline at this point, right? I mean, if you don't know the timeline, I encourage you to look it up. If we went through the whole timeline and see what's the events, I think we would lose y'all. You know what I mean? And my goal is not to burden you with information you've heard before or maybe need to know, but could get it better from somewhere else. My goal is to try to just help you understand and see how we are seeing some of this stuff roll out and play out, and the questions that we have, right? So as I'm reading, right, so I think we got these recordings that came out, 15 hours of recordings. I mean, like, that's a lot of time. Sometimes that can be burdensome for people who either don't have the time or the prior knowledge to really, like, weed through and just kind of pick out, like, inconsistencies or things that appear awkward, or, you know, not make that much sense. So that is our job, man. We want to help people with that, because here we are. All right, so one of the first things I wrote down. So let me talk about my source. This recording was released out to the media, I believe, for 2 days, and it appears they gave it to a lot of the mass media publications. I read the AP News article describing the evidence. I've read Police One articles describing the evidence, and I also read the New York Times article describing the evidence. And the New York Times article by far was the most detailed and descriptive article. So I appreciate that journalism from that entity. So one of the first things they talk about to the no knock or the knocking aspect, like why is that important, right? I mean, like, why is it so important that we have the Attorney General comes on this press conference announcement and it says that we have a citizen who heard the officers knocking an house.
Right.
And then we have a New York Times article that says they interviewed 12 people, and 11 of the 12 people said they didn't hear anything.
Right.
So let's talk about so a no-knock search warrant is generally used when you believe that there is a harm or a danger to an officer or LEO upon entering the house.
Right.
That if you knock, somebody's going to go and either go get a firearm or get a weapon and cause greater harm to you or other people. Or when there is reason to believe that upon knocking on this door, they will immediately begin destroying evidence, flushing stuff down the toilet, throwing it down, throwing it outside, somebody trying to get rid of it, whatever the case may be. That's generally the purpose of a no-knock search warrant. And it's really important, the fact that they have to determine whether or not someone actually made an announcement, because when you fail to announce, now the citizen does not know if you are someone there legally or illegally.
Right.
They don't know if you have the authority to walk in the house. And as a gun-carrying citizen, as a person who has a concealed weapons permit, and like many others, if someone comes running into my house and they don't yell out police, they're an intruder.
Right.
Right? And so, like, now we have, at the very beginning, what's crucially important is if this attorney general says these officers knocked on the door, then they were proclaiming their legal authority to make entrance into that house, to make that threshold, which therefore would make the action of that citizen, that resident, illegal, unauthorized, unsupported.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So that is key to this argument, right? It is key, and I think what's interesting is just like, how do you mesh out this conflicting testimony between this one person who said they heard something and it's 11 people who said they did not.
Right.
Right? Like, either you're going to settle on the fact that that no one, that you can't even use the evidence anymore because it's contradictory, or you're going to go to the fact that, okay, there are more people who said it happened who said it did not happen, and therefore a rule in their favor. I don't know. What do you think about that?
Well, the first thing that I think that we need to establish is what was the probable cause that was presented to the judge to give them the warrant in the first place like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So, I mean, yeah, we're at a place right now where we need to question whether the officers knocked on the door and announced or not. But I think we need to go a little bit further back to see what was the premise, what gave the officers the thought that they needed to proceed in this direction.
Yeah,
why did they need to proceed with a no-knock warrant?
Yeah.
Was there evidence that there were violently armed citizens inside of the apartment?
So you bring up a good point, right? So we had this outline, but it's really hard to stick to right now. So I'm just going to let it fly, right? We're just going to go with it. We'll see how this all turns out, right? So first of all, that's one of the points, right? What did they actually put on the affidavit to have a no-knock warrant allowed, right? So what we do know about that is that, like, say at that time you had the probable cause for a no-knock search warrant,
right?
But the time between you getting from the magistrate's office and getting to actually serving that warrant on that household and executing it, your circumstances could change.
Exactly.
And it could no longer be an authorized form. Right. Now, granted, they are saying they did not do a no-knock even though they were authorized to do it. The question is, though, is what were they, like you said, what were they concerned about? And that reason why that becomes a legit question is because we know that the boyfriend, or not the boyfriend, the ex-boyfriend who's apparently was taken into custody, the target had already been taken into custody.
He was already arrested. He was in custody. So
the question is, well, who's going to destroy the evidence?
Right.
And who's going to put the officer in danger?
Right.
So then we follow that up with, well, the officer, and I was going to jump down. The New York Times article talks about how the officer said he told officers that he had not anticipated a firefight, that he expected an unarmed woman who had no criminal record to be home alone. Mm-hmm. Wait a minute. Why? So obviously there is no. He's communicating that he just has no perceived threat of an issue. He has no perceived threat of a crime that is about to occur when he tries to make enter that household. He felt like he was surprised when a firearm was shot and when they made entry into the household, because he did not expect there to be violence. He did not expect there for someone to be trying to destroy evidence.
Right.
So okay, so we got this no search warrant. Really doesn't make sense how they got it. We don't really know what's on the probable cause about why they got it. But what we do know is that they made entry to the home anyway, right? So the question is, I'm going to skip forward a little bit. So the prosecutor releases 15 hours of evidence. And then the prosecutor does not release his argument or instructions towards the grand jury.
Right.
And his argument, which is legal, is that his argument, his instruction towards the grand jury, because it is not evidence, it does not have to be released.
Right.
It's not recorded, right? But what we also do know is that he, in his press conference, stated that he advised the jurors that the officers were justified in their shooting. And therein lies the conflict that many have found. Their lawyers mentioned that. The family of Breonna Taylor's lawyer mentioned that he pretty much, citizens were expecting the jury to determine whether it was legal. You know what I mean? Like,
right, not prosecutor, because the prosecutor is just supposed to present the evidence.
Right. Yeah. So, like, I think that's an interesting question. So, at what point were we allowing the jury to actually make the decision as to whether the shooting itself was legal?
Right.
Instead of already instructing them that it was a settled matter, or instructing them that they were justified and therefore settled, and therefore was nothing for them to deliberate in reference to that. So the justice people were looking for, or the weighing of the evidence that people were looking for from the jury, didn't even have an opportunity to happen.
I think one thing that we need to also, and we're not going to delve deep into this, is to tell the people what a grand jury is.
Okay, yeah, you're right. See, that's a great point.
So, I have a friend that's a prosecutor. Been friends for a long time. He's a prosecutor, and he told me once he can get an indictment on a ham sandwich with a grand jury. And looking at it, that's true. So let's look at what actually happens with a grand jury.
Yeah.
You know, a group of citizens, lay people, are convened in a room, and the prosecution lays out what evidence they have to try to get an indictment or a warrant for an arrest. Nowhere in that room is a defense attorney. So you've got one side being presented to this group of lay people. So again, can you indict a ham sandwich? Absolutely, because all of the evidence that you are showing inside of that jury room is against the ham sandwich. So,
you know what else is funny? Well, not funny, because it's a serious matter. So, but it was funny in like weird way, funny and different. That why choose a grand jury?
Why choose a grand jury?
Because if you're an investigating officer, detective, or police patrol officer, you can just go obtain the warrants yourself.
Yeah.
You can fill out your criminal complaint, swear out your affidavit before a magistrate or a judge, and get those warrants.
Right.
If you're an attorney, you can file a direct indictment. You don't even need to go through the grand jury.
Exactly.
But the grand jury provides a hands-off approach in these very, political, sensitive matters, where like the common fraternity who in turn works hand in hand with police departments all the time, in an effort to preserve relationships, to try to make sure people feel like they're getting a fair hearing. They will allow the grand jury to be the ones responsible,
Right.
to bear the weight of the charge.
So in other words, it's like the political entity, in this case the Attorney General, goes and presents evidence to the citizens of that city. And when he comes out and there is no charges leveled, he can say, "See, I did my job. Your own people said, hey, there's no there," is what the prosecutor can do.
Wow. And I think it's a way of deflecting that responsibility,
Right.
that weight, that they don't want. And then if you throw in, if they happen to be a Republican who's typically pro-police, it's definitely 9 times out of 10 going to be grand jury.
Right.
You know what I mean? Or if they happen to be Democrat, there's probably going to be direct indictment.
Right.
You know what I mean? So, in
It's
ideal,
political.
yeah, in an ideal world, it wouldn't even be party based like that.
Right.
But the fact of the matter is, it makes a difference because these people are ambitious. You didn't become a AG of a state because you just you didn't
He
care.
needed something to do.
Trying to pass the time, you know what I mean?
Exactly.
Let me get this degree and just hang out down here. No, they're and so they are ambitious, and so they're going to try to maneuver themselves in ways that benefit people
Right.
and benefit. And I say people, I mean like their political party. They're people that they're affiliated with. Yeah, bro. So stay tuned. We'll take a quick commercial break. We'll be right back. And look, so we took a little break, catch our breath. I felt like we were just rolling through the topics. You know what I mean? So we kind of got to slow this down a little bit. The one handicap we do have is that being tenured people in this field, we sometimes don't realize what is unfamiliar lingo
Right.
to the layperson.
Right.
You know what I mean? So we're gonna try to be mindful of that, a little bit better at that. CVC did a great job of having us slow down and break down what a grand jury is and about that process. I think we explained a little bit about the no-knock search warrant, right? So I think we kind of walked that back. We didn't go over too much.
It wasn't too deep.
Right. So let's just kind of continue on a little bit more. Let's see. So one of the things that stuck with me the most, right, and this part kind of bothers me the most, and it's the New York Times article says that the detective says he heard her voice when they were knocking on the door, right? One of the people said they knocked for about 90 seconds. The other person says they knocked for about 2 minutes. Now, I've knocked longer on search warrants I've served during the daytime.
Right.
Right. When it's nighttime and you suspect a woman being there who has no criminal history, you know what I mean? You pretty much, she's going to be there. It's a good chance, not only is it going to take her time to answer the door, but if it's nighttime, you're talking about waking up, putting a robe on, you know what I mean? Getting your bearings, realizing what's going on.
Right.
I know like some departments practice this protocol of like sometimes they'll put on lights outside the window, right? So they put on their lights and not the sound, but just the light, so they can. Some people are like question whether it's really police, especially in certain neighborhoods. So that's like another indicator that okay, this is police for real. Some people will. So anyway, I'll go too deep into that. But so this woman is. Did she have enough time? Did they have enough time to acknowledge the knocking on the door? Right? I mean, that was one thing that I was like, man, like 2 minutes, it doesn't seem like that much time. But then he says he started with a gentle knock, then he went to a hard knock. So I'm like, well, technically the gentle knocks don't count if it's at nighttime and I might be asleep.
Right.
Then gentle knocks ain't gonna make that much of a difference.
Right.
You know what I mean? So like, I don't know how long you were gentle knocking, but that's time lost in me having the opportunity to open the door before you feel the need to knock on the door.
Right.
So now they knock in. Well, so before they knock on the door, the detective said he heard a voice. He said he heard the voice of a female. So my question is, well, if you heard the voice, why didn't you wait for her to answer the door? Unless you thought unless you heard a shotgun rack, or you thought she was about to do something crazy like jump out a window, or unless you thought she was flushing, drugs and this is a scenario, not specific to
Right.
Miss Taylor.
This is not specific to
Yeah,
what these officers did. These are just
yeah.
thoughts that go through our minds.
Right. It's
For any type of
any type
warrant service.
like this is almost like a debrief.
Right.
Right. Like when we do operations. Speaking of that, that's something important to bring up too. Before we go and do a search warrant on somebody's house, there's a plethora of things we do.
Right.
Right. Like one, if you do a search warrant, you need to have a minimum amount of people,
Mm-hmm.
supervisor present.
Mm-hmm.
You have to, of course, have already. You have to do your what we call a threat matrix to understand the level of threat involved.
Mm-hmm.
We have to do we have a checklist to make sure we checked all the boxes to make sure we have done all our background information on the place and the parties that are involved. We do operations plans just to make sure everybody's on one page, making sure were these things done. I don't know if they were done or not. I'm not saying they didn't do them, but my question is, were they done?
Right.
It doesn't feel like they were.
It doesn't feel like that a whole lot of intelligence went into.
Exactly, but that's something that's typically a part of the protocol.
Right.
When we know there's going to be a relative danger situation to the search warrant, we tend to have medics on standby.
Right.
Right. If and honestly, if it's a real dangerous, like very dangerous search warrant, it's not just patrol officers doing that. You know what I mean? You're calling out our SWAT or our TAC teams. We're using more advanced personnel in that particular field
Right.
to safely execute the arrest of the person, and then when they or the entry of that building. So we're talking about protocol and standards that are not even across the board, and that's something else we can talk about too. Maybe another podcast about like just the standards
Right.
are so uneven in policing
Mm-hmm.
that it is hard to have to expect the same level of performance and excellence. You know what I mean? Like there has to be some type of common standard for policing. But we'll go back to that. Probably be a part of our defunding the police / police reform podcast. We'll probably drop that in there. So back to the question of whether or not why if you heard a voice, why not just wait for her to answer
Why
the door?
not stop and freeze and see, number one, what the voice was? Was it yelled? Who is it? Who's at the door?
Right.
Was that what was yelled?
Yeah.
What
Was it a
actually
scream?
said? Was it a scream?
Was
Was it a yawn? What's
it a
going
cry for
on?
help? Like I'm not just hopping in the house,
Exactly.
and so it just comes off as overly aggressive.
Right.
It comes off to me as overly aggressive, and
If you go back to what C-Dub said previously about the officer not expecting anyone
Yes.
at the home except for an unarmed
yeah,
female with no criminal
no criminal record.
So
It was almost like, ma'am, look, we have a search warrant for your address. We've had in the past, like, without getting into detail, we've had situations where someone's address was used to deliver items that they claimed not even being aware of. I mean, it was even delivered to the rental office, and they claimed that they had no idea where this came from, right? So I mean, like we're talking about, there's a solid in that moment there is a solid chance that she had no idea.
right, there is that chance.
Yeah, like there's that chance. I'm not saying anybody was perfect. I ain't going to the background, but in that scenario, there's a chance that that person has no idea that's occurring.
Right.
So, long story, what we're trying to get at is that if you are outside the house and you're stacked and you don't expect any danger, any destruction of evidence, you kind of know there's a female there and that she has no criminal record, and you know that it's nighttime and it's late and she's gonna be scared to death. But you knock on her door that way. She's there by herself, so it's kind of like you know what I mean. You know how people think, and you hear a voice. Give them a chance to come to the door.
Give them a chance to come and answer their door.
Their door. All right, man. So look, I'm not gonna stay on that too long because that part kind of baffles me the most.
Right.
I don't know why, but that baffles me the most. But anyway, so another point is that the FBI ballistics identify the ammunition that the bullet that killed Miss Taylor, They identify that to come from Detective Crossgrove.
Right.
However, the state,
Their lab.
their lab,
Mm-hmm.
could not conclude or was inconclusive as to which bullet or where that bullet come from,
Right.
whose gun did it come from,
Right.
that led to his death. What do you think?
The FBI is the preeminent law enforcement agency in the world.
Oh, wait a minute, but he said they had the same equipment and the same
I don't think
machines.
so. Don't think so. But you know, I can't. Let me play devil's advocate. Let me advocate on the side of the Louisville crime lab.
Sure,
for a
let's
second.
please do, because we do need to
Let
be
me advocate
more
on their
balanced.
side. They have great forensic scientists that work in that lab.
I mean, it's a state lab. State labs are pretty
And
legit.
State labs, they are pretty legit.
And Louisville is a money making state.
That's right.
So it's not like it's
That's right.
you know,
It's not like they are the run of the mill podunk,
yeah,
place.
Mm-hmm.
Because you have entities or agencies that send their forensic evidence to this lab.
Yeah.
Because they are one of the preeminent labs in that state.
Mm-hmm.
But
But
if you have the preeminent lab in the world, the FBI saying that this round or this bullet came from a specific gun, and it contradicts what the preeminent lab in the state says, I think we need a third party.
and by the way, this FBI is led by a pro policing
That's right.
leadership.
Yep.
So it would allow one to conclude that if they had an opportunity to say that it was off, they would have said it was off.
Right.
They would have said it was inconclusive.
Inconclusive.
But the FBI, you know what I mean? Like, now granted, so it goes back to whole states versus the federal government system or situation where a state sees itself as sovereign, and just because the federal government said, that theirs work doesn't mean we have to acknowledge it. Our courts are our state system, you know what I mean? And so it is truly up to them to determine whether or not they would allow that contest. So I'm like, okay, fine. You state says it was inconclusive. You FBI, who people recognize as and assume to be a more prominent, organization, and when they run their things, when they run their systems, are saying that it does come back to Detective Crossgrove. Why not introduce a third party?
Right.
Why not just say, okay, you know what? I don't know why yours is inconclusive. I don't know why yours is conclusive, but we need clarity before we take this to case.
Right.
Take this trial. I mean, this happened back in March.
Mm-hmm.
Expedite down. Granted, now the departments of forensic sciences across the country are just booked left and right. Right. We know that they are just, whether it's for those. So Department of Forensic Sciences, they help us analyze evidence and investigations. And so if you watch TV, CSI, you probably had an idea, like whether it's measuring the scratch marks on ballistics, or measuring the footprints or fingerprints, or looking at DNA. Like, they help us with a plethora of different activities, and they do the rape kits, they do everything. So like, they are very helpful. Those people are phenomenal. They do a great job. They solve a lot of cases, and they are helping citizens left and right. And they are book crazy. But that's not to say that people in that agency can't make mistakes or find different conclusions from other agencies. So if you had this quality State Department of Forensic Science, and you have this FBI who's respected and ideally looked at as like the prominent law enforcement institution,
Right.
then why not at the very least just say, you know what, we need to make sure we have the confidence that we need. It's almost like when we do autopsies, right? And you got one person gets the state autopsy, another person does the personal autopsy, and then if there's like the question as to the differences of like how somebody died, whether they're shot in the back or shot in the front, they get a third party opinion.
Yep.
But I feel like that's something that was like overlooked. That's not.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't normally get overlooked in policing.
And it's extremely important
To
in
clarify,
this case.
because if we add in the announcing,
Mm-hmm.
you're right. You add in the knowing what to expect in the household.
Mm-hmm.
If we add in the fact that she actually someone voiced and said something, and then you add in the fact that one of the bullets from that person, those are important elements
Extremely important.
that could lead to, at minimum, probable. Oh, we didn't even explain probable cause.
Causes, yeah.
So probable cause is the probability that the definition of probable cause is a citizen would believe that it is probable that a criminal act occurred,
And that person did.
and that from that indeed person. So the key word there is probable.
Probable.
So if you are a numbers person and you really trying to figure out what probable means 51%.
Right.
There's more chances of it happening than it not
Not
happening.
happening.
Now, if you ask an attorney, they hate that because they don't just want you to make a 51% investigation. They want a solid investigation that's way more than that. But at its root, right, like, it's just 51 more probable that it's probable that it happened. And so if you count for those four elements, it's probable that they were at the minimum reckless in their handling of going inside that apartment.
Right.
And their actions led to some type of possible, probable negligence. Like the fact that they ruled that it's not even probable. Right? 11 witnesses didn't hear anything. One person did, but that crosses out to 10 people.
Right.
Right? You have tons of citizens, 10 citizens, and then you have someone saying that they already had the person they wanted in custody. They were there for evidence. They expected a young lady to be there who had no criminal record. She made a vocal sound. They did not wait for or acknowledge. They waited for like 2 minutes, and then you get inside and someone shoots at you, and then of course you shoot back at that point. I get that, but the question is did you put yourself in jeopardy?
Right.
When you made entry into the house?
That entry.
And then you add in the fact that there's a chance that the bullet that a person shot is what led to her death. I mean, that's at least probable. That's probably neglect. That's a 51% chance.
Yeah.
That's a neglectful activity. Probably, in my humble opinion, I think that once people in our community can see things from another person's perspective and have the right questions to ask in politics, have the right questions to ask to your press,
Right.
to the leaders of the community, to the chief, to the city manager, to the councilwoman or councilman, whatever. These I feel like the right questions are going to help us get the progress we need. Right. All right, y'all. I'm gonna shut it down. You ready to shut it down, CBC?
Ready to shut it down. Hey,
All
just
right.
want real quick again. C-Dub did say that we touched on a lot of topics, and some of the topics that we touch on, you might be scratching your head and saying, "What the heck are they talking about?"
Right.
Well, if you have those kinds of questions, one more time, give that.
And we are
email.
on the Black Cop Podcast at gmail.com, the Black Cop Podcast at gmail.com.
That's right.
And follow us on Instagram at the Black Cop Podcast. Follow it, like our Facebook page on the Black Cop Podcast. Just type in Black Cop Podcast. It's pretty much you're gonna find us there. Instagram, Facebook. We're gonna have a YouTube page shortly, and just post some material on officer safety, how to survive a traffic stop, how to handle police and citizen interaction. So hopefully those things make a difference. You know what I mean? And this is the conversation this is not the neighborhood watch conversation that I go to while I'm at work. This is the conversation I have with my family, my brothers and sisters, and how we can try to ask the right questions, get the right answers, and survive and improve our interactions. So again, at the Black Cop Podcast and also the Black Cop Podcast at gmail.com. All right, y'all. And look, and also we are open to donation. If y'all feel like y'all like what y'all hear and y'all want to support us or y'all want to help us keep this thing going, feel free. We will have our PayPal and Cash App accounts open, and you guys can just chime in and give what you can if you so choose. But anything will help. And let us know. Give us some feedback.
Yeah,
Let us
feedback
if we can
is huge.
constructive
Yep.
criticism. Don't give me no BS. You know what I mean? Like, look, if there's some legitimate ways that we can improve, I will really look into it, because ultimately I want to give a good product. I just don't want to give good information. I want to give a total good production, and we really want to improve that and as we go. So if you have some information, please share that with us. Let us know, because we ultimately want to. And this is for everybody. So proliferate it. Share it with your friends. Share it with your coworkers. Share it with your family. Love y'all. Be safe. Peace.